last year during the Lori celebrations, and I was part of. I stayed, stayed overnight. Had a great time with the students. Your senior batch, I think Selvan and others who would. I think at that time Mahak was the one organizing the event, and I have such fond memories. And I was telling Selvan, I wish I was in the campus again and not doing virtually because it's one of the best experiences. And I really hope that once everything settles down, I can be back in the campus to spend a lot of time with all of you. Because last time I remember we did a lot of focus groups with students and got time to interact and things as well. Anyway, so today what I'm going to do is we have just 45 minutes. So I'm going to spend about 20-25 minutes to give a session from my side, and then we will keep 20 minutes for questions. And whatever questions we can't take, I'll be more than happy to interact with all of you through my various social media channels that I have, which I will also share with you how to connect with me. My goal or my ambition in my career is to create an army of leaders who will go on to achieve what I call as obscene success in their personal and professional careers. My name is Ashok Ramachandran. Formally, people designate me as a president and CEO. But what I would like to be known as is what I started off the session with. That is a person who had developed an army of leaders, which is what makes me feel very proud of about myself more than my title. So I'm going to use a very short presentation. It's more as a hang to take you all through. I'm just trying to. Ayush, where's the share?
Aman, can you give him hosting? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Sir, can you please click on?
Yes, yes. Thank you. So, can you see the slides?
Yes.
So very quickly, I think I need to also tell about my company before I talk about myself. It's only fair that I do that, at least spend a minute on this. So it's a 140-year-old company, Schindler. It's a multinational company. We are spread over 100 plus countries. We started off in 1874 in Switzerland. So that's our head office. And over the years, we expanded all over the world. And in 1998, we started in India. And I'm very proud to say that in 2019, we became the market leader. And in 2020 as well, we have continued our market leadership. We just received the financials from the government of all the all the lift companies. And we're very proud that we have retained our market leadership and also expanded the lead between number one and number two. So that's a very brief about the company. And going on with the whole digitization mode that all companies are in the world, we haven't also stood behind and just watched. This is a few of the digitization work that we are doing. So I've just showcased very briefly to all of you that today elevators of Schindler are connected to the cloud, where we work on a predictive platform. So in the past, when you have a problem with the elevator, you have to call the company, a technician comes, fixes the elevator. But since a year and a half ago, we launched the Schindler Ahead as a product, where what you see on the left-hand side on top is a small microprocessor which collects all the data from the elevator, and using the GE Predicts platform, it analyzes the data and sends to the technician the fault before it can become a fault, a potential fault. And we can fix the elevator before it breaks down. This is the kind of technology that we are in right now. And on the bottom, what you see is various media services that we're offering. So the first one on the left-hand corner on the bottom is what we call as a door show. So your elevator doors outside can be converted into a digital advertising space, which can be sold for advertising, and you can monetize it. Then you have inside the elevator, you see the gentleman adjusting his tie in a mirror. It's a smart mirror. The mirror is also showing some temperature, time, etc. So you can program whatever you want it to be showing. You can see on the next small image as well, some sale on a in a lift as well. So that's the kind of data that can be shown. So this is to show that even a very traditional engineering company like Schindler has got into digitization in a very big way. And what I've shown is a very micro view of the kind of things that we're doing, and there is a lot more that we do. Globally, we turn over $12 billion, and it's one of the industries where the opportunities are endless, because if you look at the number of elevators per person in India, we are sitting at about 6 or 8 people for one elevator, whereas China is like at 30 people per elevator. So we have a long way that we can go in terms of how many elevators can be installed in a country like India with a huge market opportunity. So we often say that we can have up and down, but this is relatively recession proof. And the kind of growth that elevator industry experiences is always, especially in countries like India, it's double-digit growth every year. So that's in a brief about Schindler. Now I would like to, what I want to do is to share with all of you a little bit of examples from my career journey, which will be relevant for you all as you get out of college into corporate in the future. And then I will have some takeaways as well from each of these lessons. So what I call as, my journey to chase obscene success. And I will talk about what chasing obscene success means in a little while. I have marked some reds, and these are the countries that I worked. And this is a journey that I'm going to take all of you through the next 20 minutes. So the first journey started for me in Schindler, Australia. Now, before I moved to Schindler, Australia, a very brief about my background and upbringing. I was born and raised in Chennai. I went to one of the best schools in Chennai called Padma Seshadri. I was an avid musician as a school student. I was more interested in singing. In fact, I did sing in XLRI last year. They all made me sing a couple of songs. And I really wanted to pursue a career in music as a future. Now, the kind of school I went to is usually all the cream of the cream, intelligent students, all of them getting nothing less than 95 and above. I was one of those not in that gang, not because I didn't want to, but whatever reason, like I really struggled with the sciences. Physics and chemistry wasn't my cup of tea. I was very good at math, which gave me some confidence to then further pursue engineering as well. And that probably was probably one of the mistakes I made. If I have to rewind myself, I probably wouldn't go back and do engineering. But I followed a herd mentality. We have this problem in India. We follow our friends. So most of my friends were joining engineering. I thought that's the best thing I should do as well. In fact, I couldn't get enough marks in my 12th to get a direct admission. So I had to go through a management quota, paying to the college that I went to. And we were not a very rich family. So we were coming from a very average middle class family as well. So the only way I could do that was to get my mom to mortgage her bangles, and then joined SRM as a instrumentation control engineering. Very difficult department. I have no idea why I took it. I think it was the cheapest course offered, so I had no other choice. I just took that. And the 4 years was nothing but a roller coaster. I would say more of a down than the up of the roller coaster. Right from third semester till sixth semester, I just kept on accumulating backs. And thankfully, by seventh semester, I cleared all my subjects, and I graduated in 4 years. And I often keep joking to people that is the best thing that happened to me in my 4-year engineering is that I passed my engineering in 4 years. And it was also, there was nothing wrong with the college. It was a great college. SRM is today a very popular college as well. But I think I probably didn't find myself very much interested in the subjects that I was, attending. So the 4 years I graduated again, because of my backs, I didn't have opportunity to sit for placements. And that was, a very difficult time. It was also the time when September 11 happened. Many of you may know that there was a Twin Tower bomb attack, and the economy was going through a very bad phase, very similar to what people are going through who graduated last year with COVID. So there was not much of a jobs available, and I really had to find myself, progressing. So almost 2 years between my bachelor's and master's, I worked in call centers. I did door-to-door sales. I worked in a music shop selling CDs and cassettes. And I really found, much later in life, how much all of these things helped me to build me as a person that I am today. Call center work helped me neutralize my English. It taught me basic sales skills when I did door-to-door sales. It taught me confidence to meet people, to meet strangers and talk about a product. And all these was all adding up in the future, which at that point of time, honestly, I wasn't aware. And then, I moved on to Australia to do my master's. A 2-year master degree in industrial engineering was one of the best things I did, was to go out of my comfort zone, which was my home in India, and go to a new place. Now, that's one of the first lessons I want to share with all of you is, when you go out for jobs, many of the young graduates graduating, always ask me like they would like to have a role either in Bangalore or Pune or any of the main metros, Delhi or Mumbai. But I would tell you all that wherever you get an opportunity, even if it is not your comfort zone place, just take it, because it really grooms you to be a better, stronger, and fitter person in future. Even if you're, for example, a Punjabi and you get a job opportunity in Chennai, doesn't matter, you don't know the language, just go for it. Vice versa can happen as well. A Tamilian to go to Punjab or to go to Northeast or to go to a smaller town for that matter. Everything will teach you something. Now, right after 2 years of my master degree, my first job was actually Schindler. And it was an entry-level job. I joined as a quality engineer. And it was a 2-year stint for me as a graduate engineer. And one of the things I did was to really reach out to the management team, even as a fresh graduate, approach them for the challenges that they were facing in the organization and how I can be of help for them. And that really surprised people, because they didn't expect a fresh grad, especially with a brown skin in a white country, being confident to approach people. And that made people notice me. I also used the opportunity to build a lot of relationship with the local Australian people in the company. We Indians, or most of the nationalities, we have a habit of hanging out only with our people. The Indians used to always hang around together. Chinese used to be together. But I was one of those people who I always wanted to meet other people of other nationalities. And that really helped me a lot. It's again something that I encourage all of you, that if you are working in an organization, don't just hang around with the same kind of people who you feel comfortable with. Because the more you challenge yourself and interact with other people, you grow as a person as well. So within 2 years, when I was 28, I was given the first role to become the boss, like what we like to be called as, or a leadership role. I became branch manager for Queensland. This is one of the second biggest branches for us in Australia. It was $100 million turnover organization. Almost everyone reporting to me was double my age. So I had to really go with an open mind that I'm not going to go there as a boss, but I'm going to go there as a colleague for them. So I call it as colleague first and not a boss. And many of you will face this challenge where you will enter organization and you will have people much older than you reporting to you, or even as a colleague, they will be threatened by you. And your job is not to show off what amazing job you can do and how amazing you are, but really how you can help them also become better. So my single motto was to help each of them succeed in their roles so that they can also grow in their career. And those 3 years when I ran the branch for Queensland was fascinating, because we did a lot of things that was a first for Schindler Australia. We were the first branch to develop a 3-year strategy for a branch. Previous to that, it was always the country which had a strategy. So there was things that I did which was ahead of times, even though I was much younger compared to them. And not ever in one meeting did I go and say that I'm the boss, I will tell you all what to do and you're going to be doing that. It's always about respecting people, getting their views, having a bottom-up approach before putting together or implementing a strategy or an execution plan. And that, I think, is very critical for young talents to succeed in organizations. So the key aspect I started developing was agility, because you have to use different styles in different organizations in different environments. Right after Australia, and this is a picture from Schindler Australia when I won the Business Excellence Award for Schindler. This was a kind of a defining moment for me, which helped me become a branch manager as well. The next one was Vietnam. I call it crazy hiring. And one of the things I learned in Vietnam was I went into a turnaround situation. The whole organization was in a turnaround mode. We had to improve the profitability. We had safety issues, code of conduct issues. The culture was terrible. People were wanting to leave. And one of the first things I did was to really bring and build a strong management team. I'll just give a couple of examples of crazy recruiting. There was one of our young talents, 26-year-old, who actually, the first month I met him, gave me his resignation letter that he wanted to quit. And he had a very good opportunity with Procter & Gamble. Now, Schindler is not a Procter & Gamble or a Unilever or Amazon. But I knew that if I have to retain him, I have to do something really crazy. So I triple promoted him from being a field engineer to become the management head for the technical department, which even the local Vietnamese were shocked. And they started questioning me, saying that, how could you do this? He's too young. But I knew that the person had it in him to make it big. And rest is history. Today he's one of the top performers in the company worldwide. I took one of the administrator, she was a secretary to one of the management team members. I took a bet on her, moved her to my team, groomed her to later on become the head of HR for Schindler Vietnam. Similarly, in your careers, you will have to take a lot of bets in terms of the way you recruit. And we should not follow a very template model of age, experience. It's more of performance and potential. I have multiple examples of crazy hiring in all my stints, including in India, where I hired my executive assistant before through Facebook. And I pursued my current executive assistant for almost 1 year to convince him to join me and my team. I think role of every management leader is to spend 50% or more of his time on people and hiring as well. Hiring is not just a job of HR. Hiring is everybody's job to build a strong team. This is a photo from Vietnam to show the kind of culture we were trying to build, to be part of their celebration. This was a Chinese New Year photo that we took. Third one was Malaysia, one of my most challenging assignments till date. The problem was culture. So here I talk about culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's a very popular statement. Before you build a strategy, you need to have a great culture. You don't have a great culture, then you can't execute a good strategy. And the challenge I faced in Malaysia was the three main races in Malaysia is Indians, Chinese, and Malays. The three of them were constantly trying to pull each other down to show the other in a bigger light. And this was including the Indians. They were, of course, extremely happy when I came on board. They saw me as an Indian CEO. But they were quite surprised when I refused to meet just the Indians for taking care of their needs. There was a group of Indians, who came and said, "Sir, we all want to meet you because we have been not treated properly in the company for all these years, and we feel you can help us." And I told them that I'm not a CEO only for the Indians. I'm the CEO for all the employees. So bring all of them. Let me talk to everybody. We had to do multiple engagements to make the organization realize how working together made much more sense than working in silos. This is a very nice photo depicting the diversity that we were building in the organization. You can see Chinese, you can see Indian, you can see Malay. And I wantedly wore a Malay costume to show them that I'm not a CEO only for the Indians. In this aspect, I want to make a point about diversity. When you work in an organization, we all have a lot of bias. The biases can come from various aspects. You may have a bias for choosing people from XLRI. You may have a bias choosing your own, like a male or female, old or young, fair skin, brown skin, from your own community, from your own state. Remember, whenever you do that, you're excluding a big population. And I truly believe that, in Schindler India, for example, in the last 2 years, we have doubled our intake of females. We have the first female branch manager in our industry. We have the first field operations director in our industry. We have the first service technicians, safety officer, many of them. And this was a very focused effort to make sure that we can give a safe environment for the female to join us. Likewise, we have taken people from the people who are differently abled, LGBT community as well, to make sure that we can be one for all and all for one. Lastly, I talk about India. The famous thing when I came here, people used to always tell me was, this won't work here. ये यहाँ नहीं चलेगा. कि boss, ये तो India है. But one thing I can tell all of you that 4 countries I've worked, I realized that people are the same everywhere. What is different is the food, the language, but aspirations, ambition, the beliefs is very similar. When I was moving from Australia, one of my Australian colleagues told me that if you're going to Vietnam, you got to tell people what to do. You can't ask them what to do. You got to be a boss. You got to be directive. But I realized it's completely wrong. Wherever you go, people like to be asked their opinions, and they want to be part of contributing to the company and the growth. We started as a very number-driven organization. When I came to India, India was in fact not a turnaround. Vietnam was a turnaround. Malaysia also was a turnaround. But India was already a great, successful company. It's the first time I was handling a huge organization which had R&D, factory, 5,000 employees, 40 branches. And I knew I had to do something different to take it to another level. And the focus was all about people, culture, strategic thinking. It's about empowering each branch to run like a company, each branch manager to run it like a CEO, not as a head office controlled organization, which we see in many organizations. The higher you go, the prouder people become, and they follow a highly directive style where they want the people to follow what is being told and not asking people how things can be done. January 2020, before COVID, we doubled the organization size. We were 19 branches when I came. We went to 40 branches. We moved from 3 to 5 zones. I invested 15 crores in this exercise to make us reach every part of India. This was January 2020, with no idea that just 2 months later, we're going to have a pandemic. In fact, my own head office was very doubtful. They were saying that, why are you investing so much? Why are you growing within a short period of time so rapidly? Why don't you take a step approach? But we had a very strategic approach. We had a bottom-up discussion. We had multiple strategic meetings, and we felt it was time to expand our footprint everywhere, including Jammu and Kashmir. Today, when I look back at 2020 performance, 30% of our growth came from the new cities that we entered. If we hadn't done the expansion, we would have been 40% below what we achieved in 2020. And this is what strategic thinking can help to achieve. If it was just a very P&L focused approach, we would not have done it. We would not have spent the money. A lot of learnings in this 15-year journey in Schindler. To this year, I complete 15 years. And if I have to share, this was from India, one of the photos from the celebration we had in India in 2019 before COVID. I just wanted to, summarize some key learnings with all of you. I'm mindful of time. I have literally rushed through this to make sure that I can give time for questions. But let me start from networking. When I was in Australia, I had opportunity to be in a car with the Asia Pacific head for about 10-15 minutes. And I took the opportunity to just make sure that I make a strong impression on him. And 5 years later, when I was given the offer to move to Vietnam, he was supposed to interview me. Instead, he just called the company and said, I know this guy, you can give him the job. I met him 5 years ago in a car. This is the power of networking. The second point is, don't wait for the organization to be teaching you everything. A lot of times people complain that you've not had a good induction, you've not been trained properly. Not everything can be taught by the organization. You can take your own initiative to make sure that you can learn and develop further. Recruiting differently, I shared examples. Respecting culture, the importance of culture. Most important for me is always remaining grounded, humble, and having a lot of gratitude for what you got so far in life. I think every one of you is extremely fortunate to have the kind of parents, the kind of teachers, the friends, to come to XLRI, study, to have such sessions. So have a lot of gratitude for it. And your goal should not be to get the biggest pay packet when you graduate and go into placements. The first 5 years I was in Schindler, I never spoke about salary because I knew I did not have a brand to show them. I have to build my brand first, and then later I go and ask for what I think I deserve. Not the other way around. But I see a lot of graduates graduating are only focused on the salary offered. And there is a lot of glamour as to who will get the highest pay package. Please don't compete with your friends, compete with yourself. As long as you are getting better and better every year, that's what matters. It is not to show off to the next door auntie or to your cousin or to your friends that I've got a 25 lakh package, 30 lakh package. Because it's not about how you start your career. It's how do you grow yourself in the next 10 years, 15 years. That's where a lot of learning comes from. Leadership with love is something that I propagate a lot. If you're a leader, there's nothing wrong in showing love. Love is not just for romance. It's also to your people and the people around you. So you can make them better corporate citizens. And finally, for me, is chasing obscene success. And for me, obscene success is nothing but, even if you're working on a project, you're working on initiative, how do you do it in a way that it inspires awe even to yourself? How do you do things different, better than anyone else, in a manner that even you are surprised at the output? If you work in an organization, people should say that this is an example. This is how somebody should be. And that is what will help you grow in your career. My dear friends, thank you very much for your time listening to me. Feel free to connect with me on my social media platforms if I can't answer all your questions today. Thank you. Thank you, Ayush.
Thank you so much, sir. It's always amazing to listen to someone's journey all the way to the top. And there's quite a few questions. So we can take some of those.
Ayush, before you begin. Hi, sir.
What are you doing here?
Hello. I bunked my office to attend your lecture. So it's always so amazing to listen to your leadership talks, and I've always enjoyed it. So I
Thank
actually
you.
bunked my office to do this.
Well, you got a bigger version last year, I think, of the same story. They got a very short version.
Oh yes. But every time there are some newer aspects to the entire story. So just like the agility piece and moving from one place to the other,
Yeah.
all that. So all of that, there is actually a lot of change from the previous lecture. But yeah,
Okay.
it's always so amazing to listen to.
Good to know that. I always wonder if I should repeat this, but every time I discuss this, everybody says, the audience is new. They need to listen to this first.
No, absolutely. Because of your journey, it just sort of motivates and I'll just tell you the guys. Last time when we sort of organized Sir's lead talk, that was the and I should not be saying it, but that was the best lead talk of our batch. And a lot of people had walked up to me since I was the one who was organizing it. So a lot of people had walked up to me and said how humble he is, like the whole career journey that you share with us. It just shows there were so many the average life that you had, and yet the kind of obscene success, in your own words, the way you've achieved it. It's amazing, and it sort of inspires a lot, and that's what the purpose of a lead talk is, to inspire us. So,
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll just ask one question.
Sure.
Ayush, I'm really sorry for bugging you and asking, stopping you from asking the questions. So, there's once when you move out from the B schools, a lot of the expectation is to have an executive presence. And since the previous positions that you've held, maybe the executive, that grooming wasn't done so much. And in a B school also, the executive presence grooming does not really come up. It's a natural instinct for a lot of people.
Correct.
But a lot of people get dinged when they go to the corporates at these levels that we go to, for not having an executive presence. So just just sort of what are the to-dos that all of these should be following? For me, luckily, it has been there. But for for these folks, how they should be basically sort of inculcating few habits to master the skill.
I think executive presence comes from a whole lot of things, and as you said, fundamental is how you are as a person. But what can help all of you? Let me start from certain cosmetic stuff and then certain internal stuff as well. I still remember, a lot of people used to tease me in Australia when they first saw me. I was like very well dressed, very well groomed, and things like that. And I think the thing is, people have to see you as a leader before you become a leader. I always say that to my team. Like if you are going to become a vice president, you have to look like one. You can't look like a junior engineer, but you have aspirations to be a vice president. I'm just giving an example. So at every point of time, I think that is very important. So you can't, and I'm sure, yes, I'm not talking about like dressing casually or dressing formally and stuff. That's also fine. But it is actually the way you totally groom yourself, the way you walk, the way you talk. Like this girl in Vietnam who became a HR head. One of the things I had to work on her was that she has to look like a HR head. So I remember, we actually, it's so funny, she went on a complete makeover, she had to change her hairstyle, her dressing. And suddenly, like she was looking like a HR head. I was like, Arey, you just got promoted and you look like one now. Factor. But that is important, but not so critical. More than that is really the confidence that you show. Like I was giving you the example, where I went to the management team members, put myself out there. Most of you will join as a fresher in any company after this. and people around you will be obviously thinking, "Arey, ye aa gaya XLR aise MBA padke, he or she is going to tell us what to do and stuff." You really have to them, to your peers, and to the people even a little bit above. I think you should show that you're a very down-to-earth, humble person, and that is not by telling them I'm humble, but really being humble. You can't go and tell somebody, "See, main kitna humble hu." It doesn't work like that. You have to really, from the way you talk, the way you walk. Like I've seen certain people, they will only talk to the bosses. They're like always kind of trying to show how, the boss is more important. And I'm talking about not immediate boss, but all the management bosses in the organization. I think you should do the other way around, even go and have lunch with the office boy, have like every day, I used to go and eat with different people. So people see you as a force to come together, so whenever I used to go, everybody will come together. That is executive presence. Before you become the boss, everybody will start saying ki mujhe aisa boss chahiye. So that is one thing I would say, from an executive presence perspective. And even if you're in a meeting, I think you should always make a point, at least one or two. I'm talking about meetings where you're probably not the main person. And this, of course, also is possible if your company management is allowing you. Like in my company, I'm very particular, I'm like, I'll ask my secretary as well, what do you think about this issue? And I encourage them to talk. So you need to be, for lack of a better word, you need to be a little bit extrovert. That's a bit of a problem for introverts. You really have to see how you can put yourself out there. There's a couple of things I would say.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mahek. Well done. I'm still waiting for the day when you and me will work together.
Definitely. So I am waiting for that day.
Sure.
So yeah, let's see super soon in future.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
I have one question for you. You
Yeah.
mentioned that that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
What I was trying to say is that people, most companies have a strategy day. They will decide what they're going to do the next 5 years. Like even startups, I'm now mentoring a lot of startups. They will all give me a financial business plan. When I ask them, what is the kind of culture you want to develop, they'll start thinking. And then they will, they will think for a few minutes, then they'll start saying some obvious words because I've asked them the question. But the fact remains that many of them haven't thought about the kind of culture that they really want to develop. If your strategy is to be number one, for example, which I think will be the strategy for most people, you really have to have a culture where you accept people to challenge everybody. You cannot become number one without that. That's an example. So what I'm trying to say is, whatever you're trying to implement, try to first work on the culture. That, cultures are, there is company culture, there is department culture, there is branch culture. I'm sure, Mahek, you'll probably experience it now in your organization, right? Everybody, there is a culture in every small team. Ek boss ka culture hota hai, then there's a super boss culture. So each of you will join a department and you can influence that. You can influence the culture that you think that your department needs. So that's what I mean.
Yes, I got it. Thank you so much. As we come from, like, we have 5 years of experience, we all have experienced some cultures in our own organizations, and your experience will help us leverage more in our future careers as well. Thank you so much.
Great. And remember, Akshay, that company culture, what is company? Company is all the people. A lot of people say, whatever, they'll say ki Indian companies ka culture itna ghatiya hai, for example. But what is a company culture? It's the people, right? It's people like you and me. We make the culture. So let us drive the right culture.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Hello, sir. This is Rahul. So
Hi,
I have
Rahul.
one question. For a company like Schindler, where the safety measures are so important, so how do you make a trade-off between layers of safety and the design innovation?
We never make a compromise on safety. Huh? It's always safety first, especially because we are in a very unsafe environment. So all the design, manufacturing, everything is focused based on how to make sure that it is safe first, and then everything else comes. Even reliability comes after safety.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. Very inspired talk. And since you've worked in so many countries, Australia, Vietnam, Malaysia, having a globalized perspective. So how do we reconcile this globalization strategy now in today's world where hyper-localization and even deglobalization are buzzwords? So what's your viewpoint on that?
Even today morning, I was talking to somebody about this. There is a lot of nationalism happening everywhere in every part of the world. But at the same time, I think a global perspective really, and when I talk about even in India context, in India, working in different states is a global perspective. It really opens up your eyes. And, a lot of people, even last week I was talking to some of our people that, like in Delhi, I have salespeople who are not wanting to move to Sonipat, but they're willing to move to Australia. I'm like, come on, you can't even move to Sonipat, then how will I send you to Australia? So, and I know why they want to go to Australia. That's a different discussion. But the thing is, agility, that's why it's very, very important. So I would encourage that if you don't have immediate opportunity to go overseas, at least go to a different city where you're not from. And you will learn something completely you would not expect. So that is why I think globalization will always remain. I think nationalism will always be there. Even when I was in Vietnam, the way I got them to achieve, so 2012 we were a turnaround, and 2014 we got Best Country Award. And the reason I think it got the award is because I invoked the national spirit among the team. I told them that Vietnam cannot be seen as this poor, underdeveloped kind of organization. We need to really show that we are better than the best. And nothing works like nationalism. If you just go and tell them that we have to beat those Europeans and Americans and stuff, they get all geared up, right? And then you just have everything else starts happening after that. So that is why it always works.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
This is Surbi Gupta, and I found myself really delighted after hearing your story. I could relate a lot to it, and it gave me a really, really good view and confidence to make my own story. In this, I had 3 questions for you. Okay, Ayush, you want to?
Ashok sir, would you be okay if we extended the session by about 15 minutes?
Okay.
Surbi, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Ayush. So I had 3 questions from you. I'll put them quickly. So the first one was that I observed in all your story, you have never followed status quo. A lot of people have told you that this has to be done in a certain way, and you decided to put it across in a very different way. Like handling human beings, you put across basic human values above cultural norms, which is not the case in normal handling of people in across cultures. So what is your opinion between of the right balance between sticking to the norms and changing the norms?
I always say that the rules are meant to be broken, but not law. Laws should be followed, but rules can be broken. And obviously the rules should be broken when it doesn't involve harming people. Like, I'm not talking about breaking a safety rule. I wouldn't propagate the don't wear mask, for example, right now, right? That is different. So when I say the rules are meant to be broken, it is the practices that has been established in the organization can be challenged and improvised. And you also have to have a way to make it, like you can't just go and, I don't know if I should use this word, but you can't be a Kangana Ranaut, you can't just be an activist. You can do the same, you can achieve the same intent by doing it in a collaborative way and showing that it works. So, for example, I will do a lot of pilot. And then I will show the organization, see the pilot works, now can we change it? Then people will accept. So that is what I would say.
The second question is an extension of this. So driving any change needs a lot of bravery inside you that, okay, I will take this risk because every new step is a risk. And I've seen a lot of intelligent people who have a lot of bright ideas, but they are not, something holds them back that they don't want to change the norm. Or even if they are thinking, they are seeing that there can be a difference or this is not fitting in, still they don't want to change it. They think that it is risky. So and sometimes brave people get too risky and then that lead to failure. So what would, in your opinion, what would be the right balance between being brave to change and stop being risky, or being a bit conservative about the changes?
I think it comes down to the individual, that's what I have seen in my career. It's very individual specific. Some people are very bold to take a risk. And I always tell people that I don't mind you failing if you're trying something new, rather than failing doing the same thing. The second thing is, if you fail fast. Very quickly move on to the next step. There's nothing wrong in trying something. If you know that you're failing, don't keep dragging it. Jaldi go to the next idea. So that is what I would say. But I would rather you all take a risk and fail than following the status quo and just going in you can do that, but you'll never achieve obscene success. That is what I mean. If I hadn't taken the risks that I took in my career, I don't think I would have become a managing director at 31 years old. Thank you.
That was a really nice answer, sir. There was third question. You talked about brand value and how you overcame that. Because,
yeah. Sir, would it be okay if we take questions from a few other people before we come back?
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Hello. Good afternoon, sir. Praneeth this side. Very inspiring talk indeed. And what was very good about the talk was your energy, which was quite palpable. So a great session indeed. Sir, my question was regarding, you talked about taking calculated punts on people and promoting them for various roles wherein they might not have fit the bill at that moment. So what made you believe that certain people could accomplish such tasks? Because ultimately, as future managers or leaders, we might be in a position where we need to delegate tasks among people, and there could be 3 or 4 candidates that we might need to choose them to delegate a particular task or, as you said, punt on them. So what factors did you decide or made you tilt towards a particular person that ultimately you said was the right choice to make?
Okay. So one disclaimer is that I think, honestly, I have a feeling, and I've thought about it many times, I think I have a bit of a gift on this that I can tell you as a baseline. But of course, everybody, this can't be kind of, copied, right? So what I would suggest is looking at the soft skills, attitude, energy, drive, somebody bringing new ideas. And I also have, like when I recruited my last EA, I had a video call. Then I invited him to Mumbai and we actually partied. You wouldn't believe this. We actually went out with 10 of my young people in Schindler, and he had no idea he was being interviewed. I just told him that if you're in Mumbai, why don't you join us for this, night out I'm having with me, with my team. And we ended up, having dinner, drinks. We went to a nightclub. We were dancing and all that. And he was being observed a lot by me. So I use various ways to interact with people in different environments, which gives me, like when he came there, the way he warmed up to the whole team, he was like as if he always knew them, So I knew that this guy has great people management skills, great communication skills, and was, in the discussions, he was sharing a lot of new ideas about trying out things and all that. So I think these are some basic things you can observe, and these things will help you decide whether you can bet on this person or not. Thank you, Praneeth.
Thank you, sir.
By the way, just adding on to that, so his EA, I know him. The much he appreciates sir is just commendable, and the kind of relationship they share. I just hope one day I share that kind of a relationship with my boss. They both are like pulling each other down most of the times. It's actually not like a boss and subordinate relationship, and it's great to have such kind of a relationship. Correct. Definitely.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
In fact, Mehak, the next EA that I got now, I don't know if Vaibhav is on the call, but I keep using his example as well. Also, I have somebody I pursued for a year. We interviewed him for another role, and he refused that role. And I told my head of HR that I'll take this guy one day. I said, this is like whether me or him. I want to see who will win this. And I kept in touch with him. And then when my EA role came, I called him, and he was actually in Mahindra. He was in a very good role. So he's from your background, by the way. He's a HR background guy, and the first time I have an EA from HR. And I knew that I had to do things very different. And when I again went after a year, he just couldn't say no. So he gave up a very lucrative, he was the head of HR for the genset business. And then from there,
really
pumps
nice.
and gensets. He's come as my EA. So I think, this is kind of an obsession you need to have on people if you want to build a great organization.
And that's something that you keep on the much I have seen you, observed you, you keep on having that eye for people wherever you go. Even here, I'm sure that in your head you are actually imagining which all and who all and all. So that's something that not a lot of new age leaders do, and that's again something very unique that you do, which makes you stand apart.
Well said.
Hi, sir. Good evening.
Hi, Satyam.
My name is Satyam. Yeah. So I have learned from the sources that the Schindler has got plans to make India as an R&D hub and manufacturing hub in near future. So what are some of the major growth opportunities and bottlenecks that you see in the near future?
We already are actually, so India R&D is a global R&D hub. We used to do 30% of R&D. Now we are at 50%. So global R&D 50% happens from India, and it's funny because even North America R&D happens from the Schindler India campus. It's a great place to be. We, to be honest, it's a very, very efficient, effective, and a very successful R&D for Schindler Group. We are a best practice even for the Switzerland R&D, even for Chinese. We have an R&D in China, we have R&D in Switzerland and in North America, but we are a best practice. So I actually think the talent pool and the kind of skill sets is much, much better in India than anywhere else. And we are very quick. That is the best part. What takes 3 months in Switzerland, we do it in 3 weeks. And even they recognize that.
And any kind of bottlenecks that you see in the future in India? Like
Not really. With R&D, I don't think there is any bottleneck. I think we really are a global R&D, not for only Schindler in general. India can be a great R&D center. I don't know why other companies aren't tapping into it as much beyond back office and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, sir. I have one question.
Hi, Anirudh.
Sir, what was the biggest challenge that you faced in your career till date, and how did you handle it?
I think it was my first management role, the one I showed in the beginning. Where I became a branch manager for the first time, or a people manager for the first time. Because before that, I've never handled people, P&L, customer, like nothing. Straight from a graduate trainee, I went into a branch manager. So I had a triple promotion as well. And that was my biggest challenge. And it was giving me nightmares as to how I'll succeed. And I prepared a lot for that myself. I read a lot of books on first time manager, the first 90 days, first 100 days. I prepared a 100-day plan, which is now very popularly used in Schindler worldwide. A lot of people taking up new roles, they have given the 100-day plan that I used to use. And I still consider that as my biggest challenge till date. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. Prithviraj here.
Hi,
So my
Prithviraj.
question is, can one person change the culture of an organization? If yes, how should he do it? And if no, what should he do?
I think if you're the boss, you certainly can change the culture, because always the boss sets the culture of the organization. There is no doubt. Today, what I want to drive is what my management team would drive, and what my management team would drive is what the -2s will drive, -3s will drive. It's very evident. You can always see that in every company. The boss drives the culture.
But sir, if we are the let's suppose a mid management level employee, and if we feel that culture is not correct, and if we want to change it, can one person, how, if he wants to, how he should influence or at least get the ball rolling? How should he go about it?
I think you can definitely initiate conversations with HR, with the super bosses and all that. But you need, end of the day, their support. If they don't want to drive that change, then you can never change it. That is very, very difficult. Or you can have, if you are head of the department, then you can drive the culture for your department. That is fine as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll take one last question and then we will wrap it up.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, Anupam.
So my question is, as we are moving towards a post-COVID era, how do you see companies?
I can't hear you.
Am I audible, sir?
A bit better.
So my question is, as we are moving towards a post-COVID era, how do you see companies bridging the gap between innovation and quality?
I don't think COVID will specifically make any different changes in this. It's always been happening. It will probably just fasten the whole thing. Innovation now will become kind of center stage. It was already coming towards that, but now it will probably fasten the whole thing a little bit more. So, and I think for me, innovation also comes down to us. How do we innovate ourselves in the way we deliver performance every day? How can you make next day better than yesterday? That is what will help you all also survive in the big bad world. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sai, I think we will finish off with this.
Yeah.
I thought I'll just take 30 seconds. I knew that I could take this liberty.
Yeah.
So hi guys, I'm Vaibhav Raghuvanshi. I am the EA to Ashok Ramachandran. One elder brotherly advice I thought I'll give you all. I know it's Ash's session, but he happened to mention me, so I thought it's important that I clarify why I came and moved from here. Moved in here. The point is that you should choose your manager and the people that you're working with very, very wisely. If somebody inspires you, go ahead for that job. Brand value, compensation, all these things are always secondary because they're all a byproduct or they're all just products of what you become. So if you are sitting in a campus placement and the company is choosing you, not choosing you, looking at you for certain parameters, you should just look for the people who have come to interview there and understand whether these people inspire me. If they do, give it the first preference. That's my take. Thank you, Ashok. Thanks a lot for inspiring me.
Well done. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your session, sir. Selvan from.
Hi, Selvan.
Hi, sir. I was listening for last 1 hour, sir. So
Thank you.
Thanks for.
Thank you so much, sir. It's rare to hear a leader speak with such candor about their journey. And as we step into the world of leadership and management, you are truly a beacon of light for all of us. And also, it is a mark of a leader that even students who have attended your session previously are so eager to interact with you again. So it's been truly enlightening and we're extremely fortunate to have had you. And on behalf of all of us, the entire PGTM batch, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you all. And those who couldn't ask here, do connect with me on my social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. You can email me as well. So thank you all. Wishing you all a great career ahead and keep chasing obscene success. See you all.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.